This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Do you remember a book you were assigned to read when you were in school that you did not like? For me, that book was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. It was required reading in the 9th grade curriculum, and I could not stand it. I didn't understand why we had to read a book about an old fisherman on a quest to catch a giant marlin. It was painfully slow and boring to the nth degree. Hemingway did not write that book for 15-year-old girls coming of age in the 1980s. Hemingway wrote that book for himself and for the avatar of who he wanted the world to believe him to be. It garnered him a Pulitzer Prize for Literature and was the last major work of fiction he wrote. Because The Old Man and the Sea was my first introduction to Ernest Hemingway, I decided not to like him or anything he wrote. To me, he was a gruff old guy who drank too much and wrote boring books. Fast forward to today, I've been watching Ken Burns' 6-hour documentary about Ernest Hemingway and have reconsidered my former opinion about him. Do I still think he was a world-class asshole? Yes, I do. But he was also a genius, a man who showed up to his writing every day, a man who loved his children, a man who asked big questions about life and death in the books and short stories he wrote, a man who was haunted by generational trauma and mental health challenges that ultimately cost him his life. I wasn't ready for The Old Man and the Sea when it showed up in my life. You may feel the same way about the book you didn't like all those years ago when you were in school and had to go along with what the curriculum chose for you. You may feel that way about a lot of things you're exposed to in this nonstop scrolling 24/7 world we now live in. Timing really is everything, and so is knowing when you're ready to consider exploring something new or reconsidering something you once thought wasn't for you. We tend to do better when we have personal agency over what we choose to invest our time into doing. Not so well when we feel boxed in or forced to participate in what they say, whoever they in air quotes are, what they think is best for us or what we should be doing. That goes for anyone building an independent practice or business, an employee looking for a promotion, a professional thinking about getting an advanced degree, or your average citizen who's looking around and saying, what is happening to my country? And how can I be a part of building something that matters to me? It's always better when we get to choose. Now, in the context of the call to leadership, in the context of being a leader, one of the things that comes with leadership is sometimes we don't get to choose. Sometimes you have to make decisions that in any other circumstance you would not choose. But if you're running a company, if you're running a country, if you're running a household, if you're teaching, if you are in any capacity leading, you at times are going to be forced to participate, be a part of something that may not be what you would choose normally. This is where real growth happens. I didn't like The Old Man and the Sea, and I fought my teacher about it. I remember being obnoxious in class and making all kinds of noise. He finally called me out on it, which a good teacher will do, and asked me to defend my point of view. Why was I so antagonistic about this book? And to be honest, I didn't have one. I didn't have a well thought through argument. I was reacting viscerally to a story that I felt zero connection to. In all fairness, I wasn't mature enough yet to understand the power of that particular book. I understand it now, and I can see why it won a Pulitzer Prize. Sometimes we have to reconsider our point of view, our current situation, especially if we are reacting and not responding. And to me, a great leader doesn't react. A great leader responds accordingly. Now, sometimes in leadership, we have to respond quickly. So we may not have a ton of time to reflect and write out all the pros and cons. We just have to, on instinct, go with our gut. This is what I'm doing. And sometimes going with your gut is going to scare the shit out of you. All right? You know, if you study universal law, if you study principles of leadership, you'll discover that history is full of situations where people who rose to the challenge of leadership, whether by choice or by circumstance, talk about those defining moments when they knew that what they were choosing was going to have significant ramifications for a certain percentage of people of the world. You know, and most of us are not leading the country, right? We're not leading even a giant corporation, but we may be leading our individual lives. We may be leading a small business. We may be leading students in an educational setting, or you perhaps may be leading in some kind of role as part of a community. Not always easy. Answering the call to leadership, it's a big responsibility. And once you've said yes to that call, you can't go back. You can't suddenly not be a leader anymore. I think of my nephew who has finished his Army boot camp, and he's also done airborne training. And back in August, when the U.S. was getting ready to pull out of Afghanistan, you know, he and his troop were told, get ready, you're going. And they were shipped down to South Carolina, where the air base is that would take him over there. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know when or if he was going, because there was a lot of, secrecy around that. But when someone signs up for the armed forces, when someone signs up to take on a new role inside of an organization, when you say yes to something, there are going to be edges to that decision. But if we spend a lot of time second guessing ourselves, that doesn't help either. However, we can always reconsider something. We may not be able to change the course of events, but we can reconsider how we think about it. And to me, that is my ultimate point of today's episode, is what in your life right now is worthy of reconsideration. It could be as simple as what you first thought about this morning when you woke up. Did you allow yesterday's events to influence how you showed up for today? What if you reconsidered how you think when you wake up in the morning and practice that, right? Maybe there's something at work. Maybe there's something or someone in your life that you have dismissed or believed, did you wrong. Right? I've been studying a lot this fall, which is part of why I haven't done as many solo episodes, but I've been studying a lot, universal law and principles of leadership through love. You may remember I had a conversation earlier this year with a man. We talked about leading with love. Neville Bellamoria, phenomenal human being. I'll put a link to that conversation in the show notes, because if you missed it, you'll want to listen to it. I just think that leading from a place of love, leading with our hearts, even if it's hard, even if it means the decision isn't going to go great for everybody. That's decisions. That's decisions. So what can you reconsider in your life? In what ways could a reconsideration help move you forward, get you out of being stuck, or help you see something in your life with fresh eyes, perhaps with a little bit more compassion and maybe a little forgiveness sprinkled in? The Old Man and the Sea may not ever be my favorite book, but I can certainly appreciate it for what it is and for what Hemingway achieved. And that's the result of growing up and answering the call to leadership and being taken through, the hard knocks of life, getting knocked down and getting back up and, saying, how can I show up today the best that I possibly can with a full heart and a frame of mind, recognizing I'm not always going to get it right, but I am willing to reconsider. So that's it for today, team. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, it is always a great day to get out there and play your position. This is Mary Lou Kaiser. We'll see you next time. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.